report and its placement as an agenda item on the December 21st special meeting. As far as policy recommendations in which we've sent, I will say that 20-113 and 21060 the department hasn't received yet, and that's on me. So they will get that this week. They did respond to 20097, and to refresh folks' memory on that, that is there was a case in which we recommended the use of de-escalation should go from should, so permissive, to shall, mandatory. And as was, I think, pointed out earlier by a public speaker, that that has happened, with the caveat, of course, when it's safe and feasible to do so. But the Sheriff's Department did change it from permissive to mandatory when safe and feasible to do so. Otherwise, I don't believe I have anything else for my executive officer report. Chair Youngflesh?
Thank you for your report, Mr. Parker. Then I'll move on to board chair's report. I too do not have anything, but I would like to say thank you to Dr. Sayon, Dr. Foster, Dr. McDonald for being here tonight, and also to Sergeant Dennis and Brayman, and echo Mr. Parker's thanks for coming and answering those questions, specifically as medical staff is outside of CLERB's jurisdiction. So I do appreciate them addressing the public and the board's concerns, though. And to also echo welcoming William Graham to the board as the investigator. We're really excited that you're here. I know you're going to do a great job, and we're looking forward to working with you. And to welcome back Eliza. She did a great job last year for those of you who are here, and I'm excited that she's going to be helping us out. So with that, I'll go to agenda item number 7, new business. And the continuance of teleconferencing meeting option pursuant to Government Code Section 54953 subdivision E. Mr. Parker?
Sure,
I wonder if we're running into the same issue that we did last month, where we would need to have a special meeting, or if we can just vote at this time to have the next.
No, you can vote. It looks like we're good on time. There is a specific motion verbiage that needs to be made, and if you'd like, I can read that out for you right now.
Yes, please do.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E3, a motion to find the legislative body has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency, and state and local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing. That would be your motion, and back to you, Chair Youngflesh.
Thank you. And with that in mind, I do see that Vice Chair Delaney and Mr. Ware have their hands up. I'm hoping that one's a motion and there's a second. So I see I'm giving the thumbs up from Vice Chair Delaney. So she's moving to continue with the teleconference meeting option with the language set forth by Mr. Parker. And Mr. Ware, can I take your hand as a second? Or do you have it up for another reason?
Sure. You can take my hand as a second, but I have a question as well.
About this item?
About Mr. Parker's executive report. Is this not the time to do that?
Well, we had moved on past that. Let me.
I have my hand up. I'll get my hand up faster next time. How about that?
It could be my mistake. It is trying to see everybody at all times and listen for them. I think we can go back to that item, but I would ask council to weigh in procedurally if we're allowed to. However, we do have the motion on the table, so let me go ahead and conclude that. So with your willingness to be a second, Mr. Ware, I would ask Pastor Spriggs to call roll for the motion.
Okay, Susan Youngflesh.
Yes.
Eileen Delaney.
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos.
Yes.
Buki. Okay, thank you. Nadia Keen Ayu.
Yes.
Thank you. Bonnie King.
Yes.
Thank you. Marianne Pintar.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Tim Ware.
Yes.
Thank you. G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Spriggs. Motion carries unanimously.
Chair Youngflesh?
Yes, Mr. Parker?
Sorry, ma'am. I keep forgetting, so somebody has to keep me on point here. With every item that comes up, if there's public comment, I should be asking for that public comment. So for item number 5, I see that there is public comment. I don't know if it's for 5 or for 7, but we do need to allow that opportunity to occur. So my apologies. With your permission, since there seem to be 2 requests to speak on either 5 or 7, can we do that now, ma'am?
Well, procedurally, I was going to ask council if we could have the board members. I know that Ms. Pintar and Mr. Ware had questions on executive officer's report. If we can go back and ask their questions, and then my suggestion would be that we handle it similar to what we did previously, and where we have the board members ask their questions and then we go to public comment if possible. Council, can we go ahead and do that?
Yeah, I'd recommend doing that for both reasons.
Okay, thank you. And then I would go back to Mr. Ware and then Ms. Pintar.
Thank you, madam. Pastor Robert Spriggs, I like it when you call me Mr. Thank you. The comment I had in regards to the executive officer's report is something that I struggle with, and that's the part. I just want to clarify the piece on when we have in custody deaths as a result of drug overdose, the drugs that got into the institution. I just have a problem with it. I just want to clarify on what's our stance on that, because obviously we're supposed to protect the inmates, and when those drugs are getting in there, somebody's had to be held responsible. So I just want to know what our stance is. And I know people are making a choice to take the drugs. I understand that, but what are we doing to make that better? So my question to you, Mr. Parker, is I just want to clarify our stance on that and the changes that we made.
Sure, Mr. Ware. If I understand your question, just allow me some latitude here. With every death investigation case, there is a general death investigation allegation, right? So with everyone that comes in without a signed complaint, that's what we do. We make a death investigation / and then the type of death that it is, whether it's a deputy involved shooting, in custody medical, in custody homicide, or whatever. So there's always that. If during the course of our investigation, we uncover or believe that there's perhaps misconduct on the part of a sworn member only. That's it. That's all we have jurisdiction over, sworn members only at this time. If we believe that, or we look into their actions a little more closely, we'll make a specific allegation against that sworn member. So you'll see additional allegations, right? So during the death investigation itself, every death investigation will just have that generic allegation. And more often than not, that generic allegation's recommended finding to CLERB is action justified, because during the course of the investigation, everything appeared to be handled appropriately by, let's not forget, sworn members, right? So everything appeared to be handled appropriately because that's all we have jurisdiction over. Now, we have opined in the past that, it looks like there may be some issues, and we kick those back to the department. In cases, in not specific cases, but in general cases in which there is a drug-related death that has occurred any time after someone's been booked in, any reasonable amount of time, to infer that basically there is no way this person would overdose because they came in under the influence, and the drugs that they came in under is ultimately what killed them. If it's a period of time afterwards, well, somehow, some way, despite every interdiction effort, drugs got in, the drugs were used, someone died. Now, what we don't know is, obviously drugs got in, someone died, but we don't know if that was a failure or an oversight or something on the part of sworn staff. We don't know if it was an oversight or whatnot, or maybe professional staff should have done something different. We don't know. But the fact is, had that person not had drugs in their system, they would not have died, and they got it in custody. That's why we're going with not sustained, because there's insufficient evidence to determine whether or not an allegation should be sustained against sworn staff. Does that make sense, Mr. Ware?
Yeah, I don't like it, but it makes sense.
Understood. Understood.
Okay. Then if Mr. Ware doesn't have any further questions, I'll move on to Ms. Pintar.
Thank you. My question goes back to the letter we received in response to our request for an audit of the cameras. And the response, I appreciate the Sheriff's Department responding to our request regarding a review of the camera operability. And I think what the request was, what else do we need to do to make sure that all cameras are operating in a way that allows full transparency. The response, again, was that the Sheriff's Department doesn't have control over the detention facility cameras other than to view and ensure the live feeds are operating and then to review the recorded footage, but that it is the General Services Department of the county that has the ability to review the operability of the cameras. So we don't have jurisdiction over General Services. And I'd like to ask Paul, what next? I appreciate the Sheriff's Department response. I appreciate that they aren't the ones reviewing the, whether or not the cameras operate. They're not the ones who decide how to get them fixed, is what I've heard them say in this response. What next? Is this something that we need to ask the Board of Supervisors to direct General Services to conduct an audit? Where do we go from here? I'm not giving up on this.
Ms. Pintar, my recommendation, at least, what I would recommend that we do is allow me, you folks tell me to reach out to General Services, because that is what the Sheriff's Department has recommended since we don't have jurisdiction over them, and to attempt to get information from them about the questions that you're asking to see if they can do so. Now, keeping in mind that county employees are required to cooperate with CLERB during the course of its investigations, I believe. Now, this is not technically an investigation. This could technically be considered a trend that we have identified through the course of our complaints, which we have jurisdiction over. So I would believe that if the CLERB would allow me to reach out, if you want the answers, to reach out to someone from General Services to see what information they're willing or that they're able to provide about this topic. And then I report that back to you, or have them come and report that back to you, something.
Is that something that needs to be a board action, or we can just simply make that request of you here?
Unless Ms. Hoffman tells me otherwise, I think you can just direct me to do it and I'll do it.
Unless I'm not seeing it, this item is not agendized, so it wouldn't be appropriate to take action on it tonight.
Outstanding. So thank you, Ms. Hoffman, for that. So basically, Ms. Pintar, you could direct me to agendize it, and then for February, and then you folks go from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I will move on to Ms. Domingos and then Ms. Kank and Mr. Wilson. Ms. Domingos?
I do have a question regarding Mr. Parker's report, and it's towards the end where it says, quote, when it is safe to do so. So when the sworn officers deem it safe to use, and I'm not trying to paraphrase, but when they deem it safe to use force. So that is the biggest issue that I think is there. It's a very gray area because it's still a very vague statement. If they could revise and narrow it down, I would very much appreciate that, because that's a very huge gray area that anything could be implied by when it is safe to do so.
If I may, and I'm not the sheriff's representative, of course, I understand what you're asking. The safe and reasonable to do so is not to use force. It is to de-escalate, right? So that's what they're saying, and I will almost guarantee you that the safety of the deputies will always be considered first and foremost before any action that they take. I mean, that's what it's going to be. So that caveat for them to mandate the use of de-escalation when safe to do so, I think is the extent, and it's a reasonable extent that you're going to get from the Sheriff's Department, unless I don't see how that would change, quite frankly. But the Sheriff's Department is here. If you have a question specifically for them as county employees, I'm sure they could say something about it, since I'm not them.
I guess the question I'm trying to ask and not doing a good job at asking is, can there be a type of parameter for when it is safe to do so? For example, if somebody has their back turned to you, it's not, that person's obviously not a threat. Is there some type of, something that narrows it down just a little, or we just have to accept that gray area and that's all?
Ms. Domingos, if I may, and I appreciate Mr. Parker, if you had something to chime in, I was just thinking procedurally to make sure that we stay on track. I hear what Ms. Domingos's question is, and we do have agenda item number 10, which is the sheriff probation liaison query. So if Mr. Parker is not going to address it at this time, that might be best reserved to ask them at that point.
Thank you so much, but I think Mr. Parker was about to say something, so I would like to hear what he had to say, and then I can
Of
ask
course.
the question again.
And that's why I had said if Mr. Parker would like to address it, otherwise my suggestion is to bring it up with agenda item number 10.
Sure.
Mr. Parker, did you have something further to state?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that with the safe and reasonable to do so, that we're talking about not a use of force, not specific. It pertains to the use of de-escalation. First, that's what this deals with. It's not saying a use of force when safe and reasonable to do so. It's saying the use of de-escalation when safe and reasonable to do so. I just want to clarify that, but I'm sure in the liaison query section that the sheriff's department, if willing to answer that, would clarify that even better than I have. Yes.
Okay. If that doesn't require a response, then I'll move on to, I believe Ms. Kank was next.
Thank you. So my question is going back to the in-custody deaths that are drug-related, that the inmate has been in custody for a long time and then died, obviously, of drugs that were brought into the jail. Is there any, whoever investigates the homicide, okay, so homicide division, do they try to find how those drugs got into the jail?
Yes, every investigation that we have received from the sheriff's department since I've been back, in reference to in custody drug-related deaths, they attempt to identify the source of the drugs, and if they are able to identify the source of the drugs, they proceed with charges against who brought the drugs in or who supplied the drugs to the person who ultimately died. That's been my experience on every death, drug-related death.
How often does that happen, that they're able to identify the source?
That would be something that the sheriff's department would have to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Wilson, your hand was previously up. Do you still have a question?
No, I just concur with Ms. Pintar, and again, respectfully request the camera issue be agendized. It is a chronic problem, and I don't think we should let it go.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Vice Chair Delaney.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in also on this be appropriate time for us to ask Mr. Parker to agendize the camera in general services that we've been discussing, get more information.
Okay. Seeing no other questions from board members on the executive officer's report, I would then ask Mr. Parker to turn it over to public comment on agenda item number 5, if there is any.
It looks like we have at least 4 requests to speak, and it's either on 5 or 7. And so my apologies again. So we'll go to Tasha Williamson. Ms. Williamson.
Yes, Madam Youngflesh. I don't know if you like intentionally or don't know how you're coming off, but you kind of come off a little rude to me as a public person. So you might want to humble yourself a little bit because this is the second time I've been missed and it's out of order. The way you've been running this public comment. A lot of changes have been made during COVID. 48 cases procedurally closed for lack of signatures. I feel like you should be able to allow people to have written signatures and electronic signatures. Hell, you guys are on virtual Zoom when you're supposed to be meeting in person. Monitoring, I'm really concerned also in the monitoring when we're talking about just setting aside, so to speak, death cases when they had drugs in their system when they went into the jail system. These are people who should have been monitored. Maybe some of these cases shouldn't have even gone to a jail. They should have gone to a hospital. I feel like CLERB is an investigatory process and place where we send our complaints and where there should be oversight for law enforcement. And this is unacceptable to me to hear that once again, we will be doing something that basically we did with the 22 cases that didn't have investigations. And so if this is the case, I think that you should go back to the drawing board to find out how you can investigate this and make sure that you're not just signing off on something where somebody died and a life was lost. Because there is absolutely so much negligence that is happening in the jails across this county. And it is somebody's fault other than the person that was put in a jail that maybe should have went to a hospital.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Next, we'll go to Yusef Miller.
Yes, I don't know where this fits in, but I'm gonna just say it here. As of 6 a.m. this morning, the Sheriff's Department went full encrypted on their radio dispatch, and this is a lack of transparency. This is a transparency issue, and I've heard also that other law enforcement have also been fully encrypted. I understand when it comes to inquiry, where you have to protect the person's name and driver's license and stuff like that, but people who respond to emergencies, whether it's law enforcement or fire, who are volunteer, or whether it's cop watching, they rely on the dispatch, and it's fully encrypted now. People who in wildfires help remove horses from the rural areas when there's wildfires, they listen to these encrypted areas. So we're going to see a lot more complaints if this is not fully transparent. This happened as of 6 a.m. So we need to really look into this. This is a huge issue, and not only in Sheriff's Department. I'm speaking it here because it's sheriffs. We're talking about Sheriff's Departments, but also other law enforcement have been full encryption. And that grant was not for full encryption, to my understanding. It was only for inquiry, where people's private data is being sent over the radio. So this is a huge issue. Please look into it ASAP.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next, we will go to Ms. Francine Maxwell.
Good evening, Francine Maxwell. I'm speaking to the executive report that was done. Please excuse me, but I could not carve out where you were speaking on the release from custody. And so we have a lot of inmates that are having drug issues in custody. They're taken to the hospital and then they're released from custody and they die in the hospital. So I wanted to make sure that those are being captured, that data is being tallied in the in custody deaths, because although the Sheriff's Department and whomever are releasing them from custody, when they're in the hospital, they're still dying. And then that should still be classified as an in custody death so that we can track those numbers. So I wasn't sure if that was noted and I missed it in the presentation, but I just wanted to make sure that I spoke to it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. And when I'm finished with public comment, I will clarify my comments to include clarification. Next, we will go to Ms. Saldana, Lori Saldana.
Thank you. I'm not sure what item you're on in part. Well,
5 and 7. 5 and
5 and
7.
7.
Executive officer report, and then the vaccine, or I'm sorry, I don't even remember what 7 was, quite frankly. Oh, the continuance of teleconferencing meeting option.
Okay, very good. So if someone could please go to your website, the board meeting information page, and try to pull up the agenda. I have been trying all evening and the agenda is not available. So that's partly why I'm not able to follow along. I think there's a notification requirement before these public meetings that you need to post the agenda, and including the closed session. If that had been available and I had seen that the audit has already, a preliminary report has already been issued, I certainly would have made different remarks at the start of this meeting. So could someone please go to your county website, click on Agenda 122, because I've tried it on 2 different browsers, actually 3 different browsers and devices, and it's a blank screen. There's nothing there. And I would appreciate knowing if that is a problem on the devices I'm using on an individual level, or if in fact the agenda was not properly made available before your meeting tonight.
Now, Miss Saldana, I can tell you that I'm able to access it on our home screen. There is a link on our website, our CLERB website's home screen, with the date bolded for the meeting. So I just clicked on that right now. That has been out since last week. We also sent it to the public distribution list, which I believe that you're on. And as far as the one link that you're discussing under board meeting, I am having, it is not coming up for me. However, that on the board meeting info, you are correct. But on our homepage, on the CLERB homepage, it's also listed there. So it has been properly noticed, yes.
So, excuse me, the Citizen Law Enforcement Review Board homepage, where it says next meeting, there's also a link to the agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
On this page. Okay, because I'm not seeing that. So if someone could please make that correction. I have not been able, and possibly others haven't been able to follow along as a result of that glitch in the link to the agenda tonight. And since you're going to be discussing the results of the audit, how soon will that be made public? The results that have been issued. If somebody could address that, I realize you can't answer questions, but I'd appreciate hearing back at some point. Thank you.
I will do so. Thank you. All right, next, moving on to Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. So I was just trying to clarify, and I saw the worry and the confusion, I think, on Mr. Ware's face when he asked the question about the death investigations involving drug overdoses in custody. And when your investigation is underway and your investigators determine that, let's say, for instance, hypothetically, that your investigators determined that staff smuggled it in and it was not a sworn person, can you clarify what your investigators' obligations are in reporting a felony crime that they are now aware of? Is there an obligation by your CLERB investigators to follow up with sharing that information with law enforcement? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers, and I will go back to my executive officer report if I'm permitted to do so to clarify my statements. Next, we will go to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have, Ms. Saldana, I was trying to, yes, I was trying to access the agenda, but without success. So that's all. I just wanted to make you all aware of that. And I'm sorry to leave my hand up. Thank you.
No worries, Mr. Brown. Thank you very much. Ms. Hoffman, am I permitted to go back to clarify my executive officer?
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, so in reference to the comments, I'd like to address each of them. So not at any time has anyone said that deaths that are occurring because someone was under the influence of drugs when they came into the jail is something that we would not look at as something that's not important to us or anything along those lines. We obviously, deaths are extremely important to me and to the folks that work here. I don't know how else to say it. We look at every single death that we have the jurisdiction over, and we assess how they were, even though we don't have jurisdiction over medical staff, we assess what was provided to them upon intake, the drug interdiction efforts that went into place, the screening, the medical records and whatnot. If someone dies of drug-related death while in the custody of the sheriff's department right after intake, we will do what we have to do to make sure that information is put out to the public, as we have always done. So in no way are we just dismissing or discounting someone dying of a drug-related death shortly after being booked into the custody of the sheriff's department. In absolutely no way. As far as our investigations into deaths that occur when someone's transported to a hospital, when as the executive officer, we have made it very clear, I have made it very clear, that sometimes those deaths technically are not reportable as in custody deaths to the state. The sheriff's department does not have to report those deaths if they've been released from custody and die in a hospital. However, as I and staff have proven over the last year and a half, if anything occurs in the custody of the sheriff's department and someone is compassionately released from custody or subsequently released from custody, but it is related back to something that occurred while in custody, we do investigate those deaths and we report out on them accordingly. So we take that very seriously. And as far as an obligation to report on misconduct discovered by folks who are not under CLERB jurisdiction, we would report that back to the department, and we've done so. We would say something along the lines of, our investigation has revealed this, and we refer it back to the department for them to take whatever the appropriate action is that they deem necessary, whether it's internal affairs investigations that ultimately lead to administrative sanctions against the sworn member or criminal charges. So I hope that answers the questions and reduces the concern with deaths. Deaths are our first and foremost, under my tenure, the responsibility of this department, and that's the most important thing. We've changed our categorization of deaths to make them the highest. We've done everything we can to bring these issues first and foremost, front and center. So that would be the clarification on my executive officer report, and I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, then if there's no further comments on the executive officer's report and the new business section A, I do see Vice Chair Delaney has her hand up. Do you have something additional you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Chairing a virtual meeting is quite difficult. It may not seem like it, but it is. And I've done this before with CLERB and also with other boards. And I just hope that people can have a little bit of patience. If you're overlooked, it's not intentional. It's just very, very difficult to see everybody on duplicate screens. I just wanted to kind of throw that in there for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I will move on to a new business 7B, then overview of notice of adverse action service process. And again, Mr. Parker, would you be willing to address this item?
Sure. This item was brought up last month by CLERB member Wilson. So I thought I would just give a brief overview. To be clear, when we investigate any case, there are two notices that go to the subject officers. The first notice is a hearing notice. It tells the subject officer and the complainants as well. It tells them that this meeting is happening on this date and this time, and here's the link and whatnot. Okay, that's a hearing notice. We do the same thing for final notices. So after the board, because again, to be clear, CLERB recommends findings. CLERB staff recommends findings. CLERB board members rule on those findings during closed session. And the only way we can report out on that is through our final notice. So we send a final notice after each meeting as well to the subject officers and the complainants, saying what the CLERB's final notice was. Well, when it comes to proposed sustained findings against a subject officer, there is a requirement that they are notified within 1 year of the date of incident giving rise to the complaint. So to ensure that they are properly notified of this potential, quote, disciplinary action, this notice of adverse action, we use a process server to make those services. It's not appropriate for us to ask, it had been floated a couple of years ago to ask the Division of Inspectional Services for the Sheriff's Department or the Internal Affairs folks of probation to serve their own with CLERB's potential notice of adverse action. And we didn't feel that that's appropriate, neither did the department. So we don't have the staffing to go and have an investigator go track down someone to do the in-person notification or the service of this documentation. So we contract with a process server. It's the same process server that's used by other county departments. So we do that. We've never really had an issue with it. There were some issues that arose, I think, over the last couple of months with serving after hours, going to patrol stations where the process server was unable to, for whatever reason, contact someone at these closed, where no one was at. And so that has been, we believe, remedied. What we are also going to do, after a conversation with the Deputy Sheriff's Association president today, as a matter of fact, we're also going to begin serving the final notices on sustained actions to deputies using the process server. The reason being, if CLERB sustains a finding against a deputy, they have 15 days from the date of being served that finding to appeal it to the Civil Service Commission. We've never used a process server to do that before. We would just send it via email. So to be sure that the deputies are properly served and probation officers are properly served after CLERB says it's a sustained finding, we will then use the process server as well for those final notices to ensure proper service. That is my overview, Mr. Wilson, at your request. I'm open to any questions.
Yeah. Is it possible to enter into an MOU with the Sheriff's Department that they will help facilitate the service of papers? I know in this particular case, the deputy was allegedly on the night shift. Nobody could get a hold of him. I would think that the sheriff or the command tech would be able to get a hold of him if he's working at night. I mean, my concern is we've got a process server situation where a deputy could dodge process. And as a result of that, we're not able to affect due process.
What we are going to do, Mr. Wilson, is I've discussed this with the process server too in the future, if there are any concerns with, any difficulties going to work locations, which by the way, are provided by the work hours and work locations are provided by the Sheriff's Department. So we know where they're working, when they're working, whatnot. The process server will reach out from this point forward. Instead of going back to a certain location 4 or 5 times, one day, once a day for 5 days in a row, and they will let us know if there are any concerns. And then at that point, of course, I would reach out to the Sheriff's Department, our liaisons, to facilitate somehow, some way making this happen. I don't think that would be an issue, and I don't think we need to enter into an MOU or anything like that. I just think it's something that would be a conversation, and we'd make it happen if we knew that it was an issue before it was too late, which is what has happened.
And has the processor service, the service that serves these notifications, have they agreed to let us know if they run into an issue in a timely manner?
Oh, absolutely. No concerns whatsoever.
And what's the repercussions if they don't?
Well, that would be up to me, right? That would be up to me to have a conversation with the management of that process server company. That's really the only repercussions that would come. And then for us to look at other alternatives not to use their business.
Mr. Wilson, do you have any other questions?
No, I just think that that it's unfortunate this occurred, and I'm unhappy nobody's actually being held accountable. And I think the vendor who literally dropped the ball and didn't say anything is actually, I mean, it's if you've got a mission, you've got something to serve, and you're having difficulty serving it, you should say something to somebody, and they didn't.
I understand your concern, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, they didn't do their job. They didn't say anything.
Is there anyone else who would like to discuss this item. It is not an action item. It is just new business and an overview, but I would open it up to discussion if board members have comments on it. Okay. Seeing none then. Oh, Mr. Ware?
No, I was just like to say, I concur with Mr. Wilson. We, without a doubt, we can't get away from holding people accountable, respectfully holding people accountable. So I definitely agree with Mr. Wilson.
I would just like to know what is going to happen with Mr. Wilson's proposal to have an MOU with the Sheriff's Department to ensure that folks are served.
Well, I believe Mr. Parker addressed this, but Mr. Parker, if I'm incorrect, would you like to elaborate or explain again, please?
I quite frankly don't think it's necessary. This was a one-time occurrence, and this is something that I have remedied with the process server company. The Sheriff's Department has provided information about who and where and when to serve them. The Sheriff's Department followed up on the issues that were brought forward. Everybody's followed up on this one-time occurrence. There's something in place now to deal with it. I don't know what else, I don't know what an MOU would serve, but again, I'm open to the direction of the board.
I think the other thing to take into consideration is that the process of an MOU could be quite complex as well. So if this is a one-time occurrence, I'm not sure. And I completely understand the egregiousness of it. I'm not sure if it's the best route to go at this point either. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm also saw that I believe we had someone else who wanted to speak, but they lowered their hand.
I lowered my hand. It's okay. I just wanted to support Mr. Wilson's comments, and everyone's done that already, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pintar. Then if there's no other discussion on this item, I am not seeing or hearing anybody. And I'm moving on to new business 7C, which is the overview.
Madam Chair, I would just remind you to check if there's any public comment on this item.
Okay, and I do believe I've been, luckily Mr. Parker has been helping me with that by checking for public comment. Mr. Parker, is there?
It looks like there are 4 requests to speak with hopes that it's in reference to new business item 7B.
Okay, and again, just so
probably
procedurally, if I can let those people who are requesting to speak know, their comments should be limited specifically to 7B at this time. We are going through and having people speak accordingly. So there is a way to go about this in an orderly manner. And again, the comments should be comments and not necessarily questions. This is an interaction per se. It is public comment on the agenda item. So with that, Mr. Parker, if you would call the first person who would like to speak.
Sure, I will call Miss Francine Maxwell.
Thank you.
Miss Maxwell.
Jacob Center.
I'm sorry, I didn't lower my hand. My apologies.
All right, thank you. Miss Saldana. Miss Saldana, are you there? No? All right, disregard Miss Saldana for now. Miss Williamson, Tasha Williamson, are you there?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I concur with Mr. Wilson. I believe that deputies should be held accountable and they should be able to be served. And there should be some type of agreement so that this doesn't happen again. If they find a loophole, more of them will follow. I also wanted to ensure that earlier we were told that you can't answer questions or make comments back to the public. But it seemed like one of your board members was out of order with her comment that she made in regards to the chair coming off rude. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will, it looks like Debbie Cortell.
Hi, yes, this wasn't about the process server part, but I had my hand up for a while, so hopefully I can still talk about this. But I just wanted to propose that I don't know if the Sheriff Department offers this already, but as far as metrics and reporting on the in-custody deaths and drugs, if the public has access to the types of metrics that can help us see where the points of entry are before it gets to the point of death, where they are finding, where drugs are being found, and offer things such as ratios, where they're being found, the types of drugs, things so that it can be more proactive instead of reactive. So we're not asking for data on the deaths, but helping us help them find out where the drugs are coming in and getting kind of that information before it is too late. And if it's already available, if you can please share that, make that a little bit more transparent so that we can see that and help us understand, is it a 1% ratio? I see fentanyl always being mentioned. Is that 1% of the total part of what's being found? Is it 50%? Is it 70%? More information to help us understand what truly is going on. Thank you.
Thank you. And that, Chair Youngflesh, appears to be the extent of the request to speak on item 7B.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and thank you for helping me keep track. So moving on then to 7C, overview of 2021 NACOL conference. I understand that Mr. Parker as well as Ms. Kank attended this conference, and I would ask each to give just a brief overview of what they had as a takeaway, if they would be willing to do so.
Sure. Ms. Kank, would you like me to go first?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, in December, Ms. Kank and I attended and we represented the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board at the NACOL conference, which was held in Tucson, Arizona. And the basic, the title of this year's conference was that civilian oversight is a permanent part of public safety. Interestingly enough, the keynote speaker was Susan Hudson. Now, Susan Hudson was a longtime independent police auditor for Orleans Parish, I believe, in New Orleans, and long time. And 2 days before this conference started, she was elected sheriff of New Orleans, which was just obviously, as you can imagine, that's the first of its kind in the country, to have someone who went from auditing and providing civilian oversight services to a department to being elected as its sheriff. So that kind of permeated the conference about the importance of and the acceptance of from the community civilian oversight. I will also note that many of the topics that were discussed dealt with ethics, of course, in civilian oversight. One of the things, I sat on a panel, I was a panelist for the Partnering Law Enforcement with Mental Health Social Workers. That obviously is something that this county is doing rather well, especially, first you have PERT, which they're linked with law enforcement, as you know, but now with the mobile crisis response teams that have been started and they're now up and running throughout the county. I was able to speak a little bit about that, and so I think that was eye-opening for members for attendees of the conference. Keeping in mind, and I was very clear, look, we at CLERB have no oversight responsibilities for these mental health response teams or whatnot, but obviously I have my opinions about their effectiveness, and to remove law enforcement from responding to instances involving folks who may be having a mental health crisis. I'm obviously fully supportive of anything that can be done to have them contacted by folks who would perhaps be better served doing so if there's no threat to public safety. So I made that very clear. Again, we talked a lot about ethics and the advanced role of civilian oversight and how it applies to public protests and whatnot. So I thought it was informative. I've been to some NACOL conferences in the past. This one I thought was the best yet, as far as variety of topics, relevancy, but quite frankly, professionalism. Professionalism of all involved, whether it was our civilian oversight representatives, members of the public, or the law enforcement representatives. It was a very good exchange of information. And with that, Ms. Kank.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. First of all, I just want to say that I was very honored to be able to attend this conference. It was very important to my education, and it was just really informative, and I enjoyed myself as well. My take home, I'll tell you my take home message in a minute, but the one session that I sat in that really affected me was the anatomy of a split second decision. And an independent film company took a BWC of a officer involved shooting, and they broke it down into milliseconds for, I don't know what happened to my video. Okay. For the, okay, never mind. For the split second decision. And that was very, very interesting. I attended a session, and I got in late on the session about women's prisons. And my take home message from that session, for some reason or other, was that makeup in women's prisons is contraband, which is really a shame because it shouldn't be, as far as I'm concerned. The other session that I attended was violence in prisons, and that was a difficult session to view. They showed the LA men's prison, which is so outdated. It's just utterly ridiculous. I totally understand why there would be violence in that prison. But what I gleaned from that was there is a film and a book about the Attica uprising of September 9th of 1971. And I just finished the book. It's called Blood in the Water. And it's difficult to read, but I think anybody that does civilian oversight of law enforcement, really, if you haven't already read it, you really should read it. It's really eye-opening. But my major take-home message is that, and this was from the very first session, that it was a reminder that we serve the community. And it is really important that we have, that we can correspond and have a discussion with the community. And that was my take-home message. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kank. Does anyone have any other comments on the NACOL conference or questions? Mr. Ware, are you putting your hand up?
I just have a question. Ms. King, do you have a video or something on that, the anatomy of a split second decision? If you do, I would like to see that.
Well, yes, it's called The Killing of Harith Augustus. And you can Google it, and you will, I believe it's on YouTube, but it's really fascinating. And the sad thing of it is it was the rookie cops that really started this whole ball rolling with the killing of him. And it was, yeah. Anyway, you go ahead and Google that, Harith, Harith Augustus, and you'll see what we saw.
And Ms. Kank, if I can have a follow-up question. You did mention that it was interesting. Was it interesting to the fact that they were trying to emphasize the difficulty in that sort of scenario when you're posed with a life or death situation? Was that what the point of the movie, or the clip is?
There's three different segments to it, 3 or 4 different segments to it. My take on that was, it was just showing how in your mind you have a split second decision. And broke it down into milliseconds of the BWC to show the split second decision to take somebody's life. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I think I'll probably watch the clip to fully appreciate what you're explaining.
Okay.
But with that, does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Parker or Ms. Kank regarding NAPOL? Or anything else you'd like to contribute?
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Sergeant Dennis and Sergeant Brayman also attended this conference. And I just want to say how proud I am that they attended this conference, because to me, that just means that they take their responsibility to CLERB very, very seriously. And I was just very proud that they were there.
Okay, well, thank you. And council, am I required to ask for public comment on 7C as well?
Yes, I do see a hand up on my
Yes,
screen.
I do too.
Okay, Mr. Parker, would you mind promoting that person, calling that person?
Tasha Williamson.
Yes, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Ms. Kank for her comments that she made, especially the comments about, the need to understand how the public feels. When talking about blood in the water, I have a best friend, Attica Woodson, who is actually running for Congress. She was named after that prison that is Blood in the Water is about. And she was named after that because of the uprising. Oftentimes we forget that it is uprisings that bring about a lot of change and a lot of exposure. It is the treatment of people who have been dealing with inhumane, excessive force, and complete disregard for individuals' humanity because of their skin color, oftentimes because of their American skin color, but oftentimes because of their skin color, because of their religion, because of their gender. And so I think that it is very important that people that sit on boards take it seriously, that people that sit on boards make sure that they understand why the public comes here sometimes and are outraged and upset and have the comments that they make, because their lives are at stake. Their lives are not taken serious. So thank you very much for those comments, because we are tired of people dying. We are tired of officers that are rogue and reckless and lawless getting away with it. And we are tired of police oversight boards like this one not being taken serious and not having the power to put these people in their place. Thank you.
Mr. Parker, is there any other comment? Mr. Parker?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. No, there is not.
Okay. And with that, we would conclude agenda item 7C. We have been going for over 2 hours. Generally at this point, we would be moving on to closed session and there'd be a break. So I just wanted to see if the board members would like to take a brief break, or do we want to try and power through this?
I would very much like us to touch on agenda item 8C, if nothing else this evening, just because we have been meeting consistently now for 3 weeks.
Ms. Domingos, I'm just asking if anyone would like to take a break at this point. That was my question. Because I personally would like to take, I think, at least a 5-minute break. We've been going for over 2 hours. If we anticipate that these agenda items might take a bit of time, and then we would come back and then finish the agenda. And I'm seeing some agreement from board members.
I agree.
And so I think, obviously people can go if they feel it's necessary, but it is appreciated when the whole board is here. So I would suggest if we can have a 5-minute break at least, so people can use the facilities if they need to, and then we can reconvene at, we'll make it even 7:55.
That is duly noted, but at this point, we are at 39 people and we're losing people. And the reason why we started that, it's not to go into closed session or lose folks, is to be able to report back what the committee has been doing. And so
I understand that, Ms. Domingos, but unfortunately, you know, nature calls for some of us, and I would hope that everyone would appreciate that. With that being said, I am having a recess until, again, 7:55, and then we will reconvene. Thank you.
yeah.
Mr. Parker, I believe it's 7:55. I did hear the prompt that it's still recording, but I wanted to make sure that we're good to move forward.
I believe we're good to move forward. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for indulging me with a quick break so we could go ahead and proceed. So I'll move on without hesitation to 8A, which is unfinished business update, authority for the executive officer to work with county staff to pursue legislation and/or to add a policy to the county legislature program in support of increased transparency and civilian oversight of peace officers and custodial officers. Mr. Parker?
Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. All I wanted to do was provide an update on this item, and I want to read the verbiage that was specifically approved as part of the legislative program. I don't know if I did that last month, so I'd like to do it now, just so everyone's on the same page about what exactly the county is going to be looking to do. The county has agreed to support efforts to increase transparency and civilian oversight of law enforcement meetings and investigations. And it further states that, for example, by permitting public case review discussion and allowing documents and information related to investigations of civilian complaints of misconduct, deaths, and other specified incidents under oversight entity jurisdiction to be made public. So that is the verbiage. That is what the county has, the Board of Supervisors has voted to support those efforts. And at this point, it's almost like a wait and see as bills come up and as bills might be put forth by the county. But I just wanted to just give that update that that's what's going on. No other additional update is known at this time.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions? This is a update only item, so there's no action necessary. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. And then, unless Mr. Parker, I need to call for public comment again, I would move on to 8B.
I do not see any requests for public comment or for comment about 8A.
8B, update authority for the executive officer to work with county staff to request the county board of supervisors expand CLERB's jurisdiction to include personnel involved in providing medical care in county detention facilities. And again, Mr. Parker, if you could provide an update.
This item, as you know, CLERB fully supports having jurisdiction over personnel involved in providing that medical care, to include those folks who are contracted to do so. At this point, this item is in the Board of Supervisors or in their court, so to speak. Once there is action taken by the Board of Supervisors, if they approve that to update our authority, then we will meet and confer with the impacted unions and address any existing contracts. But at this point, I have no further actions been taken thus far to my knowledge.
Okay. And again, are there any board
Madam
members?
Chair.
Yes, Ms. Hoffman.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify what Paul mentioned. I from what I'm hearing from Labor Relations, we would be doing meet and confer before going to the Board of Supervisors. So just the.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman, for my misstatement, correcting that. Thank you so much.
Okay. And is there any questions, comments regarding that update for 8B? Okay, I'm not seeing any.
Ms. Maxwell, Board Chair?
Ms. Husband, is that you?
Yes, I'm under CLERB COSD. Ms. Maxwell has her hand up.
Okay, prior to Ms. Maxwell, I do see that Ms. Pintar has her hand up as well. And then I'll call on any public comment after the board member comment. Ms. Pintar?
Yes, thank you. I just had a question for council. Ms. Hoffman, does meet and confer have to happen within a certain time frame, like a designated contract renewal, or can that happen at any time?
I'm not sure if it can happen at any time, but certainly with this coming before the board, it would be something that would trigger the requirement to meet and confer. Outside of the regular negotiations period.
That's what I wanted to know. If it could happen with outside of the I guess contract isn't the right word. If it could happen outside of the regular meet and confer, or if it had to wait until that regular process was due or up.
Yeah, we're working with Labor Relations, but my understanding is it does not, and it can happen at any time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Ms. Pintar, are there any other board member comments regarding 8B? Okay, seeing none, I understand Ms. Husband said that there's public comment. Paul, if you wouldn't mind calling Ms. Maxwell if she still has public comment, or anyone else.
Ms. Maxwell, are you there?
Yes, good evening. Thank you. Francine Maxwell. I would just like to ask that at your earliest convenience that you notice the community so that we can put pressure on our elected officials, the County Board of Supervisors, because we need some things to be more fast tracked. We need people to have more of a sense of urgency. And when they receive letters and emails from their constituent bases, things begin to move and get agendized a whole lot quicker. We know that meet and confer can be drug out to over a year and a half, and then we won't get anything. We want to make sure that we're building in trust and accountability, and this would definitely help the community. So if we can get some type of notice of conversations or anything that could be made public so that we can put some pressure on our elected officials, that will be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. Mr. Parker, is there any other public comment for 8B?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair Youngflesh.
Okay, I'll move on to 8C, which is the update for the Racial Disparity and Racial Profiling Subcommittee. I understand that their co-chairs, Tim Ware and Buki Domingos. I would call on each of them individually if they would like to give an update. Mr. Ware, do you have anything to update us regarding this subcommittee?
No, good afternoon. I will yield my time to Ms. Bugos, please. Ms. Domingos.
Okay, Ms. Domingos, then can you provide an update regarding what occurred in the subcommittee?
So a brief update in the interest of time. We have met consecutively now, I believe since December 22nd, once a week, Wednesdays, for about an hour. And at each meeting, Mr. Parker is present. We have also taken minutes, should those be needed at any time. Full disclosure, I had spoken with Mr. Parker today, and he had advised that everything that we discussed at the meeting was nothing confidential, and it could be shared at this meeting. And so what our main topic that we have been focusing on, and just to keep me on track really quickly, I will pull up our notes from our last meeting. For example, we are, one moment, I had it here. So our first meeting, we designated who the chair or co-chairs would be, what our course of action would be, and what the main purpose for us meeting would be. And the main goal was to look into, because we are convinced that based on the data and the evidence that we have been seeing as a board and objective facts that we have latched onto, and now the most recent report from the CPE that there is racial profiling involved, And our goal for the first meeting was to gather as much information as possible to be able to educate ourselves to move forward with gathering data. We called or used sources like the Campaign Zero report that was done by a third party through the AC, that was contracted out through the ACLU of San Diego. And we also used the CPE report, which was also contracted out by the County of San Diego Center for Police and Equity, which is the CPE report, and which was contracted by the Sheriff's Department. Our duty as the ad hoc committee, we have members, Bonnie, Ms. Kink, we have Officer Wilson, we have myself and Mr. Ware on the committee. And we have decided to meet once a week, 5:30 or 5 p.m., which was best for members. So our next meeting will be tomorrow at 5 p.m. and we'll continue discussions. And that was also one issue that I had brought up today, where we were discussing at the last meeting, which was continuing the conversation on how to approach removal of law enforcement discretion, which is a topic that we have not yet finalized that we're going to take over to our next meeting. I'm reading from my notes, so it looks like I'm not looking at folks when I'm speaking. That's the only reason why my head is turned to the side to look at the second screen. So as GI also had spoken about today at the meeting, partner with law enforcement. It will behoove us to partner with law enforcement. And I believe this will also give us access to more information as the CLERB. But we were also mindful, we discussed at the meeting ad nauseum, that partnering with law enforcement did not necessarily mean that we were going to agree with law enforcement 100%, that as the oversight committee, the CLERB, it was our duty to hold law enforcement accountable, which will also mean that we may not necessarily agree on cases and our findings may not be the same. And then we adjourned our meeting to tomorrow at 5 p.m. Otherwise, we will be meeting Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And I will call on committee members, Ms. Kink, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Ware to advise, because I'm sure there is stuff that I missed.
Well, Ms. Domingos, as the board chair, generally the board chair will, or the co-chair would give the update, a brief update of where you are with the purpose of the ad hoc committee. And my understanding of the purpose of the ad hoc committee was to come up with suggestions in response to the CPE report. With that in mind, because the ad hoc committee has a specific purpose as opposed to a standing committee, my question is, where would you be in far as your progress to that? When do you anticipate being able to provide that to the board?
So as mentioned initially, when we had asked for permission to form this committee initially, we all agreed that this has been a very long-standing issue, and it would not behoove us at this point to put a timestamp on the issue, because we have a lot of data to sift through, and we are starting to receive responses from the Sheriff's Department to our questions. And I think some were received actually this morning, and they were shared not too long ago by Mr. Parker. So we will be discussing those ad nauseum tomorrow. So it's hard to put a timeline on this, but we definitely, as the ad hoc committee, have suggestions. I have suggestions for what we need to do as specific action items, but I would rather not give a suggestion at this meeting today. I would like to take it into the ad hoc committee for further discussion so we can present at our next meeting.
Of course, and that's not, I just wanted to have a kind of a brief timeline of what we're expecting, because as you're aware, ad hoc committees aren't for a long-term nature, they're for a specific purpose. So thank you for that, Ms. Domingos. And well, before I open up to any public comment, are there any board members that would like to discuss this or have questions? I'm not seeing, oh, Ms. Pintar.
Always something, right? I just wanted to say thank you to the board members that are spending additional time on this ad hoc committee. Appreciate the additional work and look forward to hearing your recommendations.
And Vice Chair Delaney.
Yeah, I second what Ms. Pinter said, but I also have a question. Could you clarify for me exactly, and I apologize, I missed the meeting where this committee was organized. Can you clarify for me the purpose of this committee and what type of recommendations that you'll be making? I hope that's not too broad.
No, so that was the first task that we had to overcome when we had the very first meeting. We spent some time, reasonable time, discussing what we wanted to get out of the ad hoc committee. And one of the biggest ones, like one of our first or second agenda minutes, was detailed plan on how to close the gap on racial profiling, and also having our ad hoc committee members had to lean on reports, like, because Paul gave us some guidance on how he was still waiting for racial identity profiling data, so the RIPA data. So we didn't have everything in place, but the main goal for this committee was that, yes, there is racial profiling, and two, how can we as a committee come together to have specific action items? And action items, for example, would be having, for example, a community town hall, having things like trainings for law enforcement. I believe that Wilson had a great suggestion. It was, I believe, the last meeting on the meeting before the last, where he used comments like the trainings where he used specific language. 1 second. Exactly. He said post-certification trainings are great, but they go above 18 months before the next recertification. And what he meant by that was trainings that officers get have to be on a much more regular basis, because 18 months was too much of a gap, and things and laws and requirements and situations do change. So these are things that we're looking into. And then we spoke also a ton about DEI trainings for law enforcement, and how possibly recommendations to increase the time for those trainings, because it's much more complex than just a few hours, possibly every 18 months that was possibly only given to supervisors. So there's a lot of issues that we spoke on, but that's just to talk on the specifics of why this committee was formed. Did I address your concerns or questions? You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you.
Okay. I see no other board members. Mr. Parker, is there any public members that would like to comment specifically and limited to 8C?
I see that there is one request to speak, and I will go to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I am the chair of the NAACP's Criminal Justice Committee, and I am doing some evaluations and work in de-escalation, part of as research, and I'm also looking at some human factoring. Full disclosure, my son is the supervisor of internal affairs for Miami Police Department. And I have another cousin who works with SWAT in another area, not in this jurisdiction. I would love to be involved with this committee. The other thing is, I'm an older Black gentleman from the South who have seen it all. And I'm looking forward to doing what I can to sort of, do as much as I can to bring us together. Now, I'm not someone who doesn't realize that there's been some serious problems in policing, but I can honestly say too that the people I know who are involved in policing hate bad policing or policemen more than anything, because there's been a broad brush used to paint them all in the same, and their lives are being made very challenging these days. So if you're looking for members of the public to become involved with your committee, I would love to, and I think I can bring some data experts along with me to help you. One other thing, I was recruited to work for CPE, but I turned them down. They were once located in Berkeley. So I just want to say that. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
We heard you, and thank you very much, Dr. Brown. And it looks as if Tasha Williamson, are you there, ma'am?
No, I'm sorry. He never, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Brown?
To the best of my knowledge, Chair Young-Flesh.
Okay, thank you. And then with that, I'll move on to agenda item 8D, which is the update for the in-custody death data review subcommittee. And I believe Vice Chair Delaney would update us on that.
I'm gonna defer to Paul, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, at this point, since I'm the primary contact moving forward, at least until we can reconvene after the results from Analytica Consulting, I just want to let every board member know and the public know that I meet with Analytica Consulting. They're the vendor that was selected to do this independent death data review that CLERB has asked to be done, obviously. I meet with them every week. We anticipate their final report to be issued in March of 2022. So they're making great progress, and I'm looking forward to see what they present to us real soon. So March of 2022. So with that being said, I would anticipate the final report being placed on the April 2022 agenda. And that's the extent of my update, Chair Young-Flesh.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. And if there's any board member comment question on that action, or that, not action item, but the update. Okay, I see none. Mr. Parker, would you mind being so kind as to see if there's any public comment?
There is none noted.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9, board member comments. And this is different than the probation liaison query, which is coming up next. So do any board members have any comments at this time?
Yes, I'd like to say something.
Pastor Spriggs?
Yes, ma'am. I'd just like to thank every person in the community that have come on tonight to express their opinions and concerns. It does my heart glad that we're starting to get more people to come to our meetings. So I just want to tell you all, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Spriggs. Is there anyone else? Okay, I don't see anybody and I'm not hearing anyone. So with that, I move on to agenda item number 10, which is Sheriff Probation Liaison Query. At this time, I recall that certain board members had questions. If they still like to bring them up to the sheriff or probation liaisons in a general nature, I would encourage you to do so now. Okay. I am not seeing any hands raised. So then I will move on to agenda item number 11, which is closed session. And I would ask council to read us into closed session.
Pursuant to Government Code Sections 54956.75A and 54957, this board will convene into closed session to consider items 11A and 11B on tonight's agenda.
Thank you.